You've got questions, I've got your answers. Hydration is key. Okay, here we go. So I made this post on the gram saying, ask me a freaking question if you have one, and I will answer. So I'm going to pull up this post here, and let's look at these cues. I'm going to go through them. All right. Someone that exists. Leo, I've seen you, brah. Let's take a quick look at your prof. I've seen you commenting and shit. You're going to get a follow back. Leo, following you back. I've seen you commenting and stuff. Maybe you don't want me to follow you, but I just requested. Anyways, your question. Can you give me a look into how you learn to train around your issues, like the experimentation /time/ whatever else went into it? So I think that a couple of the recent videos I've made, if you haven't watched, are really helpful and directed at this and give like an in-depth kind of breakdown of how the imbalance has happened and what specifically has become crooked, or which muscles have got short and tight, which ones are lengthened, where the dysfunction is and how it looks, and what I've done to like kind of try to alleviate some of it. So I think watch those first if you haven't. What I will say here is that the number one step is to get a correct diagnosis and to pin down what the problem actually is first. What so commonly happens is people get incorrectly diagnosed, and then you start prescribing the solution based off of incorrect diagnosis. For example, oh, my lower back's tight and sore all the time. All right, you've got a weak core. You need to strengthen your core. Who the fuck knows? It could be a million different things. You don't know that's actually a weak core, right? That's a very generic response. It could be the case for some people, but is that the correct diagnosis for you? So for me, it took quite a few years of seeing a lot of different people, physiotherapists, chiropractors, osteopath, podiatrist, she was a foot expert, athletic therapist, whatever, and then taking ownership of learning in depth about human anatomy, muscles and bones, and understanding if this is going to be crooked than that muscle, and really grasping on a fairly deep level how things could be misaligned and what the response is going to be from different muscles, and just understanding those structures helped me a lot, I think. I don't have a perfect understanding of it, but getting the diagnosis from a lot of different people to pin down exactly what is out of alignment and in which direction and how it's all pieced together and how my body's compensating by moving in these kind of faulty patterns, getting that correct mostly to understand it, and then you can start to kind of figure out which muscles are going to be problematic and then how you need to go about releasing them. I'll just give you a really simple example. My hips are rotated in a way where the right side, let's say this is my right hip from the front, this is the left, the right is forward and up. Okay, so that means that the left is back and down, right? So this would be neutral, and nobody's perfectly symmetrical, but mine are fairly significantly pulled out of position. The right is forward, meaning the left comes back, all right? And then the left is down and the right is higher, okay? And so what's going to happen in the left hip, we know the glute med. It's a muscle that sits kind of on the side of your hip. If you put your hand on the top of your pelvis and you feel the ridge of your pelvis, the iliac crest, right? And then you go down some, there's kind of like a meaty portion. And you keep going down, you're going to reach kind of the side of the top of your leg, and there's kind of like a bony knob sticking out, a little bump. You should be able to feel, dig around in there. That's the top of your femur, or the greater trochanter, I believe it's called. So this space between the top of your pelvis, the iliac crest, and the top of this femur, the greater trochanter, is roughly where the glute medius lies, the gluteal medius. Okay, and this muscle primarily is responsible for bringing your leg out to the side, abducting your leg, so lifting your leg up out to the side. Although it's complex, it also lifts your leg up some. It's also going to extend the leg back some, depending on the fibers. It kind of spans out. Okay, I'm rambling. You don't need to know that. Point being is that muscle, if the left hip is sitting down, that muscle is going to get kind of compressed, right? Because it's getting in between there, where I kind of explained. And you know that the hips are sitting down and they're back some. So the glute max and some of the other glutes are going to be overactive or more active on the left side. So you can start to piece together, if you know the anatomy, if you understand the glute med, you know what it looks like, and you know where your hips are positioned out of position, sitting out of position. And then I'll go and massage that spot on the left side and the right side and feel, wow, the left one's way worse. Clearly there's way more tension here. I'll do different stretches, kind of lat stretches or bending over to one side where it's kind of, and move your foot in and you're like stretching through that glute med some. It's always way tighter on the left side. You can start to piece together through a correct diagnosis and understanding of anatomy and then personal experimentation and application of some of these ideas. You can start to figure out what is a problem area. And for me, I need to do a lot of work to release that glute med through stretching, through myofascial release or massage. And so I have a bunch of methods, and I know that's a problem muscle. If I've been sitting for a long time or I did a leg workout, that fucker's going to be tight. So I know that if I'm going in to do an arm workout, I need to kind of release my hips first and then my shoulders, that I got to pay some attention to that glute med. So that's just an example. But again, I think I would go and watch those videos and maybe that would make it more sense. I hope that answers your question, man. I hope you let me follow you back, Leo. Moving on to Mike Dillon. What's been the diet approach for the growth in the past few years? Cheers, brother, for acknowledging my growth. Hasn't been easy to stimulate more growth as an advanced lifter, given that I'm staying natty. Mike goes on to say, I often hear plus 500 calories surplus recommended with 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, but curious if you kept it even closer to maintenance and just focused on optimizing training. Second part, for sure, Mike. Let's see, Mike. You left a question. I haven't seen you around that much. You're not even following me either. All right. Mike. I'll still answer your question, though. It's a good question. Yeah, primarily the latter part. I haven't focused. I haven't tracked calories. I haven't tracked protein intake ever. Not that I think it depends on your personality, your characteristics, and what works best for you. I think for a lot of people, macro tracking is an effective way to go. For me, it I've never really needed it, and it seemed like it's just like boxing in my nutrition, and I haven't wanted to do it. But it's important to acknowledge that different strokes are for different folks, right? Different approaches can work for different people. I think it depends what makes you tick. So I have nothing against that. I really have seen training to be the primary stimulus of growth. And nutrition and rest and recovery are secondary. You need adequate nutrition. You need adequate rest. But I have never seen those parameters to spark additional growth. In that if I up my protein intake, I double it and I keep my training to the same. Do I grow more? No. I've never seen that. If I increase my calories, go into a 500 calorie surplus, keep my training exactly the same, does that lead to more growth? For me, no. I've never seen that. If I keep my calories and protein intake the same, but I manage to progressively overload or train with more intensity or start training more often or some new training adjustment that makes the stimulus on my body for muscle growth more intense, more successful, have I seen growth? Yes. That's what I've seen growth from, 100%. And so I think if your diet, your protein intake, or your rest and recovery are lacking, it can slow down or impede the growth that you're going to get from your training. But I've never seen any of those factors to enhance the growth. And so I think it doesn't hurt to go into a bulk. If you really want to prioritize muscle gain above all else, you don't care about gaining fat, bulking's not going to hurt. Maybe it's going to give you a little extra growth. From the studies I've seen, there's some signs that it will lead to a little bit of extra muscle growth, but you're going to have to put on a lot of extra fat. The protein stuff from the studies that I've looked at shows that the 1 gram per pound of body weight is high. And I would say in my personal experience, I think it's really high. And I've gone through a phase or phases where I'm obsessed over protein and I eat extreme amounts of protein. And I didn't notice it to lead to more growth. Obviously, there's a lot of parameters and variables going on, and I'm just trying to assess and cue into my body. But through this period, over the past couple of years where I've seen growth, is probably 20 pounds of muscle plus, I have not focused on a caloric surplus. I have not focused on eating tons of protein. I eat healthy whole meals, just regular food, oatmeal, eggs, sandwiches. Sometimes I eat healthy, sometimes I eat some shit, pizzas. I try to emphasize eating healthy whole foods, and my meals look like a pretty regular person's would. There's nothing that unique of like, this is a bodybuilder's meal where there's 4 chicken breasts here because he works out. I'm mostly just eating normal, healthy food. And that's just based on my own experience. I've just never seen it to make much of a difference, to be protein obsessed or to need to go into an extensive bulk. Hope that answers your question, my dude. Have you, here we go. Domud, 9 heart emojis. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate, or my sister, or whoever you are. I appreciate your admiration of my physique. I work so hard to look muscular and aesthetics, and I really appreciate it when people notice. It means a lot to me. Ando Armand, have you thought about competing in arm wrestling? Not really, although I will say I am a fan of the arm wrestling sport as of the last 6 months. Devin LeRat came up in my shorts. He's shit-talking his opponents and fucking slamming them down. It's pretty badass. Hooked me. I thought, this guy's badass as fuck. And I got into it. I followed the whole Devin versus Levon saga. It was pretty disappointing with the result. For those of you that aren't following arm wrestling, you should look up Devin LeRat, Canadian dude, really interesting physique, 6'5", 6'6", long ass arms, gigantic hands, like an alien built for arm wrestling is what he looks like. But he's facing off against this dude that's like 400 pounds and just like fucking gigantic. And it's like, dude, it would be impressive that if he could even compete with that guy. Anyways, those of you that aren't arm wrestling don't give a flying fuck. But I'm following as a fan. I'm into it as a fan. I like arm wrestling. It's seemingly getting more and more popular. Mostly, I'm just a huge fan of Devin LeRat. He's a badass dude. I like his style. I like his insights. I like what he has to say. I like his approach, his mentality. I haven't really thought about competing. I would like to maybe at some point, like, not compete, but like do some arm wrestling and like join a club and like get some training. But I would have to transition out of arm growth being my primary focus, because my training is like super specific and like highly tuned to get more growth. And I just don't see how if you're going to, dabble in other things, I'd have to back off. And maybe in the future, that would be something I'd transition. For the time, I'm just a fan of arm wrestling. How do you deal with biceps tendonitis when curling? The Lord's Cheaps asks. I don't know, my friend. I'm sorry. I've never had biceps tendonitis, so I recommend you go see a professional, physio, chiro, doctor, somebody. It's always a good place to start. They may not fix your problem, but they can help with some stuff and point you in the right direction. It's the beginning of the journey, if you haven't done that. And then do some research on your own. Try to learn more about it. Those are my recommendations. But I've never had bicep tendonitis. I've had my fair share of injuries and issues, but biceps tendonitis is not one of them. So that's my recommendation. I wish you the best. I hope you can find something that helps improve that situation. Smoothie Zenny, most impressive physique for only training arms. Thank you, my brother or my sister. I don't think there's many other people out there only training arms, so it's like a pretty narrow bandwidth to be the most impressive within that realm, that niche of only arm trainers. I might be the only person who's maxing it out. And I'm wearing the crown as the number one only arms trainer, bodybuilder, physique guy. But yes, I have been pleasantly surprised with my ability to grow the other parts in my body, and it's honestly a bit of a fascinating science experiment that I think there's a lot of insights or conclusions that can be drawn from, and that this hyper fixation on exercise selection and isolation of certain muscles is, I think, vastly overstated. I thought this even before, when I could train properly years ago. That I thought, sure, do a few different movements, but I got super into that content too. And people, you gotta do this movement, isolate. And I was like, oh, fuck. After years of it, I was like, oh no, man. I think it's the weight and the reps and the intensity and the volume and how often and all this other shit. And through, my experience of just continuing to push and continue to ramp up, I started to see some growth in the back, then the shoulders, now the chest. It's like, fuck, man. Like, I think your intensity, your volume, the way that you structure your workout to stimulate growth, regardless of the movements that you do, given that you do them with decent form and use control and whatever else, I think is way more important. And I hope that that's what people take from my experience. And that, like, this idea that you need, 7 different exercises to hit your whole back is like probably overkill. Like, you can do it if you want, but if you don't train with adequate intensity, if you don't hit all your workouts, if you don't, scale up the weight somehow, or maybe add more sets or train a bit more often, something to continue to stimulate that growth and make it more and more intense, that's what's going to lead to the growth in your back. Whether you're doing a lot of rows, whether you're doing a lot of pull downs or pullovers or whatever, my back's grown a lot from just doing dumbbell tricep extensions because I'm pushing with such intensity. It's stimulating the working muscle and the stabilizers. And now I'm emphasizing it, trying to get more of a stretch. And I'm managing to do it without pulling my shoulders all crooked and shit. And everything's like staying together. Praise the Lord, knock on wood. This journey continues. And we don't go back to Snap City. Spent some time there. That was not fun. Anyways, rambling. Luke Reese Thompson. Thanks for the question. What do you do for cardio? Nothing. I have a very similar ankle issue and compensation patterns. Sorry to hear that. It sucks. I just walk as I find it problematic to run, do cycling, indoor rowing, cross trainer. So I can relate for sure in that a lot of, typical cardio options kind of exacerbate the problem because you're just moving through a wonky pattern. You know the deal, Luke Reese. What I'm doing currently for cardio, though, is towards the end of my arm workouts, the supersets, I've kind of evolved into a new training style more recently where this isn't as much the case. But over the past 6 months, I really shortened the rest times up towards the end of the workout. Long rest times in the beginning, big fan of that, and then shorten them up. And I'm out of breath, man. I'm struggling for air. I'm just going max intensity, and I'm bouncing back and forth between sets of tries and buys. And then I do drop sets where I'll do, 5 consecutive sets for triceps with just, 20, 30 seconds rest in between. I'm out of breath. I'm drenched in sweat. I didn't really think it would be good cardio, but I was back in my hometown of Nelson, BC, which is a very mountainous, hilly place. And I was hammering up one of the hills while, chatting with somebody on the phone, and I was crushing it, no problem. And in years past, I would have struggled way more. I was like, shit, my cardio is actually pretty good right now. So short answer, long answer, short answer, long, is that arm training with really short rest times as part of the workout has actually got my heart rate jacked through the roof and given me some better cardio. So whatever you can do, Luke Reese, I don't know if you're doing some form of training and you could maybe just shorten the rest times down in whatever movement you can do and just do, a number of sets with really short rest times, push yourself hard, boop, 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 and you get that heart rate up. Personally, I found cycling in the past led to the least amount of issues with my hips and my legs. So you could try doing that, but you're saying that's giving you a problem here. So it's a bit of a pickle. And I would say maybe my main recommendation would be to expand your mind outside of traditional cardio forms and what exercises can you do? Because it doesn't really matter. You don't have to get cardio from one of these classic. I know you think cardio, so it's okay, I need to run or I need to row or I need to cycle or I need to do elliptical or whatever. But it's no, you can get cardio really doing anything as long as it gets your heart rate up. I'm getting it from doing arms. So whatever movement you can do or whatever exercise you can do, hopefully you can do something. Just add in some of it where you really shorten those rest times up and then gets your heart rate up. Try that. That's my thought. Brian Carlos, heart emoji. Thanks, my brother. Thanks. Did I say your name right? Brian Carlos 6. Thanks for the love, dude. Oh, Luke Reese coming back in. What do you think about sessions with lower intensity sets that give you a higher total volume? Have you ever used them? And if yes, what were your results? This is a fantastic question. I love this. I've done this for sure. And my Fuck Sleeves arm program, which is one of the courses available on my site, which is intense, but out of all of them, I would say is best suited for beginners. There's a number of workouts in there where the set intensity is lower, in that you're not training to failure. You're saving a few reps in reserve. And as a result, you're doing higher total volume. And volume is an interesting thing because how do you think about volume? Is it the number of sets or is it the amount of weight times the move times the number of sets? Meaning if you do 10 sets, but let's say curls, you're just curling the 60-pound barbell for 10 reps for 10 sets. Is the volume just 10 sets as opposed to if you did, 60-pound barbell for 15 sets for 10 reps? Is that higher volume because you did more work overall? I think it is. I think the overall definition of volume should be the total amount of work done, in that it's the reps times the weight for each individual set times the total number of sets. That's the total workload or the total volume of the workout. And something I'm recently experimenting with is thinking about progressive overload in this way, where I'm trying to progress the workload. Whereas previously I was more focused on progressive overload in trying to progress the amount of reps for a given weight that I could do in an individual set or a small number of sets. In that the dumbbell extension behind my head, I want to be able to do more weight for more reps in any one individual set, or at the beginning of the workout when I'm pretty fresh and I take long rests and I'm not really fatiguing myself. Now kind of shifting more into like, okay, because I did that for a while, and I just made a video where I'm going to kind of go through all my different training phases and what I've seen from all the different styles of training I've done and what's led to growth and what hasn't, and how I've managed to get the guns all juiced up, all my personal experience and experimentation and shit. Is that I've gone through a phase fairly recently within the last year where I've added a lot of strength, progressive overload to my lifts in a lower amount of volume, and not really seeing the subsequent muscle growth that I would have thought. And so to your question here, Luke Reese, I'm now kind of shifting into trying sessions where I'm more focused on increasing that total work output, that weight, reps times weight times sets. And I know that doesn't answer your question about lower intensity, although I have done workouts like that. Those I haven't seen to be as effective. And what I'm doing right now is keeping the intensity really high, but keeping the rest time in between sets high the whole time. So I do my set of tries, I rest 3 to 4 minutes. I do my set of buys, I rest 3 to 4 minutes. That gives me like 8 minutes of rest for each muscle, 3 to 4 minutes of rest in between any individual set, 8 minutes of rest for each muscle. And I do that for the whole workout. I don't shorten the rest time towards the end. And this allows you to try to get a full-ish recovery in between each set and decrease the cascading fatigue effect, meaning, at the beginning of the workout, you can obviously move your maximum amount of weight for reps, but then as the workout goes on, that weight and reps drop, and the lower the rest time is in between sets, the more they're going to drop, because you're effectively carrying fatigue from one set to the next more substantially than you would if you rested much longer. You're going to limit that fatiguing effect. Obviously, you're still going to fatigue more, but if you keep that rest time high, then you're going to be able to do more workload. And to your point, Luke Reese, you could also try to maximize that workload by lowering the intensity so you don't gas yourself out as much. I fiddled around with that a little bit years ago, and I didn't notice it to be that effective. There seems to be something quite potently valuable in training with really, really high intensity, at least close to failure, if not to failure. And so I want to keep doing that, but I also want to keep this work volume high. So I'm just going to keep a rest window high and keep the set number fairly high. And as a result, though, the downside is the workouts are going to take longer. So there's always a mixing and matching of how you want to move these parameters around. But I could ramble on about this shit forever. I'm going to move on. But there's my thoughts on your question. I think the fact that you're asking these questions is awesome. And it shows that you're on the right track, in my opinion. Because these are the types of things you should think about with your training. I would say it's a bit more of like an evolved perspective or thought process, but you're on the track more so to thinking about your training in a way that's more productive, in my opinion, rather than just like, hey, does single arm kneeling one leg down using the rower machine arm pull lat with the handle sideways twisted up your ass, does that work better for lower lat stimulation as opposed to overhand lat pull down reverse grip twist? I don't fucking know, man. Why do you care? Sorry. Another good question here. Luke Reese. Dude, you're hitting me. Have you ever done seated leg curls and extensions? If yet, yeah, they do. They exacerbate the imbalances. Pretty bad. I don't know why. It's in a fixed position. The seated quad extensions were pretty rough for my psoas on the right side. Hip flexors in general. Yeah, I found that fixed position to not work. For legs, the lunge, the split stance position, I've had the best success with. It really has allowed me to train with some intensity and not make the muscle imbalance worse. So I don't know if you've done any lunging, Bulgarian split squats, stationary lunge, jumping lunges, is what I do. Try that out if you haven't, if you're having some of these kind of similar issues that I'm having. Do you ever do dumbbell curls and lying dumbbell tricep extension? Dumbbell curls I used to do a lot more of, hammer curls specifically. The reason I prefer the bar is because I like to push to maximum intensity. Let me hit a hydration break. I'm yammering at a really high rate here, drying myself out. Got to stay fueled. Okay, back to your question. Oh yeah, dumbbell curls. So dumbbell curls are a good exercise, but the reason I prefer the bar, because I can do both for sure, in terms of like muscle imbalance, injury issues, the dumbbells don't give me any problems. It's standing curls I can do with different variations, fine. But the hammer curls, I just found difficult to progress because there's just more ways that you can fuckery the movement. In that when you're doing hammer curls and I want to push all the way to failure, but I want to keep my form strict as possible. Because if you push to failure, but as you approach failure, your form just gets sloppier and sloppier. And then you're like, wow, I did 14 reps today instead of 12, but it's just because your form deteriorated. That's not actual progress, right? You want to keep your form consistent and reasonable, but at least consistent, so that any increase in reps or weight is actual strength gain, actual muscle gain, not just a deterioration of your form, substituting away quality form for an extra rep. But it's tough because if you go in there and you're like, last time I got 13, today I'm going to go for 14, I'm going to push myself to the max. That's a good mentality to have. As you get close, it's hard to like, and you're pushing to the limit, it's really hard to keep everything tight and make sure your elbows don't flare and whatever. So what I found is I just consistently with dumbbell curls or hammer curls, trying to push to the maximum intensity and scale up the amount that I can do, my form would just deteriorate slowly, workout by workout. And I'm like, wow, I'm slowly improving. And I'm like trying to keep my form strict. And then I would film a set and I'd be like, holy shit, I'm just swinging the weight around. I haven't actually gained any strength. I've just made my form shittier. With the barbell, there's less ways to fuck around. You're in a bit more of a fixed position in that I bring the weight down to my top of my legs and I bring it all the way up. Of course, you can still swing. Of course, the elbows could still flare, but I just find it easier to be like, keep the torso stationary as best you can and keep your elbows tucked. And as you approach failure, think about those two cues, and you should be good. What happened to my lappy? My lappy tappy. Oh no, did I run out of battery? Anyways, that's why I prefer to not do dumbbells. But, to each his own. And if you're doing some sets where you're not really hyper fixated on progressive overload and maximum intensity, I think they're good. Or if you can find a way to keep your form good, but that's why I like barbells more. Hush, keep it down now. Okay, Luke Reese, I'm definitely gonna follow you back, my guy. Number of fantastic freaking questions, dude. Okay, let's continue on. We got a few more cues to hit here. Hush, keep it down. Voice scary. Shocked face. 6 fire emojis. Fuck yeah, dude. Gas me up. Boy. Appreciate your love. How do you train your obliques to look that lean? So there's a couple things here. What do we got here? Julian Askren, 2002. You can train your obliques to grow the size of them, for sure. Although the core muscles have seemingly a higher limit to grow, in that you can't get your core muscles like absolutely gigantically, enormously bulging unless you're a liver king. But he's on some special shit, apparently. I don't know. How do you train your... So you would get your body fat low enough to have your obliques look lean. That's what you should focus on. And to do that, you're going to want to get into a calorie deficit, meaning you should burn more calories than you consume. So you're either going to need to add in some cardio or more activity of some kind to keep your diet the same, or decrease the amount of food that you eat, the amount of calories you consume. Maybe use a MyFitnessPal or one of these calorie trackers if you want, or just make some small adjustments to your diet or whatever is going to work for you. Or a combination of both. And that's going to reduce the body fat that lays on top of your obliques to make them look leaner or appear? I think that's what you're asking for. In terms of training your obliques, I'm not doing any direct oblique work, but the lunges, I'm holding the 70-pound dumbbells and jumping up in the air. That's probably hitting my obliques. My bicep training probably hitting the obliques. Just pushing with really high intensity, the core is getting activated for sure. And I think that's to the point of as long as you're active doing something, you have probably enough ab development and musculature to have abs. You just need to get your body fat low enough to show them off. Unless you're a complete potato and you don't move at all, then you probably really don't have much ab muscle development. You may not have abs, but for most people, as long as you're active, working out a couple times a week, doing something, even if you're just playing sports, like your core is getting significantly activated anytime you're moving in a functional, dynamic way. If you want to add a few core movements on top of that, go ahead. But I think primarily it's a matter of getting your body fat low enough. So moving on here. How many more cues we got? A couple more. Rides Selvaggio. Sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. Trying my best. I feel the exact pain you feel because I have Madelung deformity in my left wrist. I don't know what that is. So makes my left forearm shorter than the right, and building muscle just fucks with my body. But I've learned how to box. Very, very, very good. Triple very. But still, the building muscles leaves my muscles so imbalanced. I got my left hand is bigger than the right. I don't know if you're going to be able to tell. If I put them here the same, you can see. I don't want to touch this mic because it's so sensitive and it starts giving feedback. Anyways, my left hand's a little bigger than the right. I don't obviously leg length or limb length discrepancy can cause imbalances, and I don't have as much experience or expertise in that area since mine was primarily caused from a injury that caused dysfunction in a joint that then led to compensations in my body and kind of subsequent imbalances or asymmetries throughout my body, up the chain, down the chain. So I think the limb length discrepancy is something that I'm not as qualified to speak on. But I would say, man, the fact that you can box triple very good is a big win, and maybe just keep boxing. Because sometimes it's just about finding ways to manage it and work around it. I don't know if there's anything to change the length of your forearms. So when I read this comment, I'm yeah, maybe muscle building there's probably some ways to work around it still. And maybe you could do movements that take your forearm or your hand out of it, there's different kinds of like a lat pullover machine where your just elbows are in the position, or there might be some other stuff you could do. You get creative, attach a cuff to your forearm to do pulling and pressing movements. People do that with delts where they attach a cuff to their wrist so their arms out. There might be something like that you could do. That's a thought. But I'm not really expert in the limb discrepancy. But at the very least, dude, you're boxing, you're throwing a sick jab. So, maybe just focus on that. It's not the end of the world. I don't give a fuck about your chest. Your physique is spectacular. Thanks, Claudio Longo. Ralph Lisnitz says, yeah, it's crazy to see people criticizing while I look like a scarecrow. Don't be hard on yourself, man. I think it just depends on the lens. I appreciate your love, by the way. I think people that are hardcore into bodybuilding and they're looking at C-Bum or these other dudes that are full-on bodybuilders, and that's what they're used to seeing on social media, and they see my physique. There's a lot of ways you could criticize my critique. There's a lot of lacking areas, certainly. But if you're not into hardcore bodybuilding and maybe you're into fitness in general, or you're just into regular shit or whatever, you would look at my physique and think, oh, this is quite impressive compared to the average person. So I think it just depends on the lens, and I don't really take it that personally, people criticizing me. I think some of the critique of the lack of chest development was constructive, and it's motivated me to improve that area and find a way. And then there's always just haters too. There's always just haters. And the funny thing, actually, you're talking about the hate, what I've noticed, you're never going to get rid of the hate. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not that worried about it. But the hate changes. What kind of hate you get changes. And there used to be so much more shade and hate on my physique lacking, or my physique not being good from negative people or trolls or whoever, just people criticizing. And now that has shifted. There's not as many comments as a year ago from that. And it's more now he's lying, this isn't real, or he's taking PEDs. So the thing is, you're never going to win with these negative comments. You can't get rid of them. But I see that as a huge win in that now people are not, their first thought isn't, oh, your physique's trash. It's like, oh, you're lying, you're actually training your full body. Or, oh, this is like terrible information. Or like, oh, you're taking steroids. So it's like, okay, so it means you're like not, your first thought isn't that my physique sucks now. Now you just have to try to discredit me. That's better. Because ultimately, that doesn't matter, man. And people that support and offer positive feedback, that's what's more important. But it's funny to see how the negative comments change. 2 more cues. Can you do bar dips and chin-ups at least? No, I cannot. I think that's all you need, in my opinion. Oh, sorry, I'll give you a shout-out here. Harold Robo Geraldo. I think that, he says, I think that's all you need, in my opinion, to work the whole body, and even better doing them weighted. I completely agree. If you could rip some fucking high intensity, dialed in, super consistent, good form, pushing your limits, progressing the weight, dips and chin-ups, you could be yoked as a motherfucker in the upper body. The dips are going to hit your triceps, your delts, your chest. The pull-ups are going to hit your whole fucking back, maybe not the lower back. Do some leg work or something that involves the lower back. And your whole upper back, your rear delts, your biceps, your forearms, you're going to be jacked as fuck. I completely agree. I can't do those movements. I get too much activation of a lot of the muscles that are problematic, pulling my shoulders further out of position. I've tried many times. I think for more information on like specifically what's going on with that, you could watch the video where I talk about the imbalances in my upper body and how I'm just growing my whole upper body with arms is the title of the video. That explains in more detail there, but I agree with you, dude. That'd be a killer program, 100%. You could get jacked as fuck with just those 2 movements, if that's what you wanted to do. But if you could successfully do those movements, you'd probably benefit you to have some variety and add in a couple other pressing variations and pulling variations. Lastly, Main Street. We're all waiting for the OF. Dude, I got an OF already, man. An OA, Only Arms, is up and available. You can access all my training programs on there and updated arm selfies. There's no cock pics, though. I'm sorry if that's what you're looking for. It's not for sale. Pictures of the leather Cheerio are not up for sale. So I'm sorry, my dudes, but I got an Only Arms account. Go to the link in my description. Check it out, dude.